Welcome to Opinionated Benchwarmers Podcast, episode 197. Your opinionated benchwarmers are back to do what we do best, and that's discuss sports. We got my boy Ramon in here today, and my brother Los, our brother, is handling some business, so he'll be back hopefully to recording with us next week. But Ramon, man, what's popping, man? How you doing?
Man, I'm doing well, man. Definitely football season has gotten off to, let me say, football season in general has gotten off to a good start for everything in my household with the way LSU's playing, the way that obviously you see my Colts rolling as well too. So it's just really been a good time for me. So all is well on this end. But how about yourself, bro? How's everything on your end?
Man, I'm feeling good, man. Every time I'm recording with you, it's always a privilege. And obviously with you boys and what we do from a week in and week basis for the new listeners. I mean, we enjoy it. You can get a passion through the episodes. So man, I'm happy. I'm excited to get into this, man. Most wonderful time of the year. So much sports going on. So we're gonna jump into it, man. But first, before we get started, we want to let you know to make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on wherever you like to listen to your podcast at Opinionated Benchwarmers. And that's how you can get notified when we drop this content. Share that link with a friend. Also, we're on YouTube. So if you want to join 13,000 plus subscribers, make sure that you're subscribed to our YouTube. That's how you can get the content that we drop. Hopefully we can throw in some recaps, emergency episodes. And when we drop these episodes online, and then, obviously, word of mouth is where we hit hardest. So make sure if you enjoy what you're hearing, make sure that you are sharing the good news that there's a new sports podcast on that's going hard here. But Ramon, man, we're excited both. If you haven't listened to us before, both graduated from LSU. So, our LSU Tigers are sitting 3-0 on the football landscape after a big win against Florida, hosting them down by the Bayou with a 20-10 win. Behind us is 220 passing yards, a touchdown, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that pick that he threw in a moment. But the LSU Tigers are sitting ranked number 3 in the nation, Ramon. I mean, I would calculate. I know Clemson is on a decline. They just had a really bad loss this past weekend. However, I think it's still a tough win that we went in there in week one and got a win. And I think this Gators win, it needs some respect on it too. But I'm interested to jump into it, man. Just our thoughts and how we feel about these LSU Tigers.
Yeah. So, as you said, man, I think that anytime that you get an SEC win against a team like Florida, who you look at their record, obviously in 1-2, but you look at really the personnel, and Florida is still a very talented team. I would venture to say probably one of the top 15, like just from a pure talent standpoint, teams. And this may come back later on because people will begin to see kind of what their ending record will be because their schedule is just so crazy. But if you look at the
Oh my
sheer
God.
talent
Yeah.
on the roster, they have one of the most talented rosters that are out there. And so, when you're able to secure a win like that, solidify a win, really off the back of honestly your defense. What we've been able to see with LSU this year thus far is that LSU truly has a real solid defense. One of the best defenses, I would say, in the nation at this particular point. And you see a defense that's solid at every level, whether you're talking about from the D line standpoint, what the DNs do, also at the linebacking level. And then what we see, obviously, in the secondary, it's kind of bringing those shades or the memories of DBU, back to kind of the forefront of our minds. And so that's the biggest thing that sticks out to me with this team right now. What I will say also, too, was the big thing that stuck out to me this weekend was truly the depth that you have at linebacker. For you to lose Whit Weeks, who is in my opinion, your best defensive player. Some people will say Harold Perkins, and I can understand that if you want to go the route of saying Perk. But I think that Whit Weeks to me is the best player on defense, and I think that also too he is undoubtedly your leader on the defensive side of the ball. And to lose him on what I think the third play of the game in particular to a call that was the correct call by the letter of the law, but I still think that the law needs to be redefined, the rule needs to be redefined a bit. But to see the depth with Devon Keys coming in, you end up losing West Weeks at a certain point. You end up seeing another Weeks and Zach Weeks come on. So you can never have enough Weeks brothers at this point. But when we look at LSU right now, I feel like we're seeing kind of shades of the old LSU where we had the dominant defense. But to be real, and I'll kind of leave it at this point to pinpoint or to give it back over to you. What we do see right now at this point is some struggles there offensively. So still some things to be determined.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not the 2019 offense with Joe Burrow, or even the one a couple years back with Jaden Daniels, where you're leading in every statistical category. But I will say this, not to get too far ahead, but to kind of extend off of that. I mean, the whole Florida to 79 yards rushing, and then DJ Lagway obviously threw 5 interceptions this game. We got a tough defense. Um, it brings me to this point as well. I think that the reason why our offense can be as bad as it is because our stagnant, I'll say, is because of how great the defense is, which plays into your point as well. But DJ Lagway, he has had a rough go at it so far this season. And if you're not familiar with him, he was a 5-star coming out of high school, committed to Florida. I think he started a couple games last year when their starting quarterback went down. But he's a guy that had high expectations. Some people had him in Heisman talks as well. Uh, and he hasn't really shown it so far. But I think you have to get a credit to the defense. Now, Lagway is coming into a very hostile environment. I think this is his first away start,
Yeah,
SEC away
SEC, yeah.
start, and man, you coming into a hundred plus thousand people screaming. It is a tough environment. So I didn't kind of like how people have been bashing on. I mean, that's a tough position to be in, which you mentioned playing one of the top defenses in the country. But flipping on the offensive side, with Nuss, I mean, I think so far this season, he's done a decent job of managing the game. We did learn this week that Brian Kelly said that he's dealing with some type of torso injury or whatever. But I mean, we can't think it's a big deal. He's been a full participant in practice and been playing every game, so that's no excuse. But to hear Brian Kelly and mention his thoughts about how Nuss is tasked with managing the game and that we're not really trying to take that many chances because of, how great this defense is. It is kind of concerning to hear, because I think that you have to score the ball. I'm a New Orleans Saints fan, got on a New Orleans Saints hoodie and everything in the back. And prior to this year, which is a dumpster to fire, which we'll get to in a moment. But you know, we've had great defenses and the offense never matched the momentum. We lost a lot of games that way. And I mean, there's plenty of season left. This is a marathon, but you have to be concerned, like you mentioned, about the offense and Nuss and what they're not allowing him to do. Maybe it's not as Nuss. And then the offensive line is a concern, which we knew that. I mean, coming into the season and off season, but something's got to give, and we're waiting for this offense to break. But we have to face the reality that it may not happen. But we got Southeastern, which is a cupcake game this week. Hopefully, we can make something shake and execute on some stuff this week.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, these next 2 weeks are very telling weeks because, as you mentioned, you have Southeastern and then you have an Ole Miss defense who just surrendered, I think, 500 plus yards this past weekend. So you have really it should be two compromising defenses. And if you can't get things done in these next 2 weeks, like you said, it ultimately lets you know where this offense truly stands, which to me as well, as we know, even in being LSU fans in times past. We've had terrific defenses and we haven't been able to get over the hump because of the offense not being what it needs to be. So to hear what Brian Kelly said, now I do feel that, what he did in the initial press conference, I felt like that might land well with the team. I didn't agree with it per se.
I
Because
agree. Yeah.
yeah, I think that it's kind of the hoorah for his players, but at the end of the
Yeah.
day, you have to hold this offense to a standard. If we want to talk about truly being a national championship contender, at a certain point, you may run into a situation where it may be a tough day for your defense. We've seen that routinely from having special offenses to having a special defense. Every now and then you run into a tough particular day where you need that other side of the ball to kind of bail you out a little bit because it just isn't your day. So for me to just depend on the defense and just say, you know what, we're brilliant on that side. Let's not worry too much with the offense. We'll just manage games. I don't think that that's a championship mentality. I think that you need to be striving to be elite on both sides of the ball. Now, you do, as you already talked about, have some limitations with your offensive line. I think that in this particular game, they couldn't exploit things from the deep ball standpoint because you look at a Florida team that sacked you 7 times last year, including their top defensive lineman coming back specifically for this particular game. So I think that they wanted to kind of protect that a bit. But my biggest concern also with the offense, beyond scheme related things, beyond what we feel with the offensive line and us, is to me some of the personnel decisions that I see there. I see Caden Durham on the sideline way too much. I don't care to see Caden Durham on the sideline 50% of the game or 50% of the offensive possessions. Caden Durham is our best running back. I need to see him out there 65, at least 65% of the snaps out there. I need to see that. You could rotate the other guys in Harlem Berry and Jawan Johnson beyond that, but Caden Durham has to be out there. So I do have some concerns also too about personnel at specific times, but neither here nor there. They can prove it within these next 2 weeks, and maybe
Well,
Southeastern won't prove it to
yeah,
me, but Ole Miss will let me know too where we
yeah.
truly are.
I just want to see some execution this week. You're right, and I could care less. I could care less to see Juwan Johnson get carries. I think it should be Harlem Berry and it should be Caden Durham right now. Juwan Johnson should be our emergency back. It's just not like you said. I agree with that. I mean, even in his short stint, 15 carries, 93 yards. I mean, dude's explosive. He was our best runner last year when we couldn't run the ball a lick.
Yep.
He was a spark. But not to beat a dead horse. We know what we need to do. Again, I'm not a fan again of Brian Kelly and his antics because this mirror is kind of like him banging on the table
Yeah.
against our loss in USC in our week opener last year. I don't care for the antics. I just want to see you be real. And the reporter had a great, I can't think of his name right now. Sorry
Michael
not to give him
Cobble.
credit, but yeah, there you go, Michael Cobble. But it was a legitimate question. I get him trying to defend his team, but I think he could have done it a little better. It would have landed a little better. You could be respectful to the question and be real with your fans and also defend your team. Yes, it was a big win. I know you don't want to take away from it, but this offense going forward has not shown up yet. So
Right.
so we'll move forward, man. We'll see where we're going. We 3-0. Let's rank number 3. We got a Cape Cup game this week, and then we'll see what we're made up against Ole Miss the following week. But as we move along, another big sports weekend. We had Canelo Alvarez and Jamal Crawford in a very, very,
Jamal Crawford.
very
Huh? He didn't win basketball on
oh my God. I
Terrence
went
Crawford.
basketball. Terrence Crawford.
But
Terrence Crawford. Whenever I move fast, Terrence Crawford, we witnessed him uh, up his record to 42-0 after a mega fight, one of the biggest fights probably of the decade, against Canelo Alvarez, who held a 62-2 record. I mean, it was a great fight. I mean, Terrence Crawford. I mean, he's a what is he? He's a three-weight
yeah,
undisputed champion, light welterweight, and super middleweight after winning this past weekend. Only the second fighter ever to do so in the four belt era to be undisputed in three weight classes. I mean, just put on an absolute masterclass. But Ramon, I think the biggest fight of all that night was me being 30 plus and trying to stay up past 1 a.m. Eastern
yeah.
time to see the fight. And I can't
Nah.
say that I won.
I think that was crazy. That was insane. Honestly, to be real, I thought that I had missed the fight. Like I went, of course, I watched the LSU game and all that, and so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
later on that night I was still, I think, watching some, sports related stuff and all of that. And so I went to go check Twitter
Right.
because I'm like, oh yeah, I know, the Bud Crawford and Canelo fight happened. I'm trying to see who won, and so I went and searched Bud name, and I'm not seeing anything about results or nothing like that. And I'm seeing that they hadn't kicked off, and I'm like, man, after that, at that point, it was already like, my time, midnight, particularly at that time. So I already know, obviously, like you said, from an East Coast standpoint, I don't know what they were thinking, like why they thought it was acceptable to kick that off at that particular time. Like, even if they had started that 2 hours early, it still would have been technically late based upon, of course, 30 plus standards, like we talked about now. But but still, all in all, like you said, it was a heck of a fight. Honestly, I think throughout the fight, really Bud once again just really showed us who he is as being, as we talked about, off the record, the best of our generation. Bud, I will say personally for me, as far as fighters that I've actually been able to just watch and follow a lot, for me, he is the best that I've seen. And people may say that that is controversial. I know you're gonna have people out there in the Floyd Mayweather camp, and I'm not here to tell you that Bud is better than Mayweather if your guy is Mayweather. I'm just saying, for me personally, and what I like to see from a fighter, Bud is the best that I have personally seen. We were able to see him go up multiple weight classes for this fight, and people were a little bit concerned about, okay, how would he deal with Canelo's power? Would he be able to kind of get in the middle of the ring in the trenches with Canelo? And you saw Bud go blow for blow. You saw him be, I think we probably already anticipated that just from a technical standpoint that Bud is a technician, and so I think that most people probably felt that from a pure boxing standpoint, he would go in there and outbox Canelo. But to see him be able to withstand the power of Canelo and to also kind of shake Canelo up a couple times, I think in that ring, it just showed who he is ultimately. I think that Bud, we got to have them all-time discussions when we talk about him at this point.
For sure, all time great. And I share that sentiment. He's probably the greatest I've ever seen in my generation, greatest fighter of my generation, at least. Of course, respect to Floyd as well. But, I think it's nice to see Terrence Crawford get this type of buzz now because it seemed, honestly, until the Errol Spencer fight, I feel like the world didn't really understand, or the casual boxing fan didn't really understand how great this man is. And to me, I felt like he held up on Errol Spence. Probably could have done him much more. You need to check out that fight if you hadn't seen that one. But Errol Spence is just, needless to say, that fight happened in what, 2023, and Spence is just about to have his first fight since then in January. So that's essentially 2 years he put Errol Spence out of commission. This is not an Errol Spence bashing session. Errol Spence is a great fighter as well. But to make my point of how great this man is, and like you said, it just seems like if you watch the fight, Canelo was a step ahead, step behind every time. Terrence was just a technician in the pocket. Bud even showed his power,
Yeah.
and knocking him back. The famous clip, if you hadn't seen it now, is But to hear Canelo speak with such great respect about Bud and just saying, hey, that he's a great fighter, he's better than Floyd. I don't know if that was just a knock at Floyd because of some, some bitterness from back in the day, but you got to really truly believe, I mean, Canelo's no slouch. His
Yep.
record and resume speaks for itself. But like you said, to go up two weight classes and to do this, I have to agree with Bud. He's the face of boxing right now, and I'm looking forward to see what he goes to next. It's just such a shame that at 30, what is he, 38, 38
38
years
now.
old,
38.
so he might be winding down now, but I think, honestly, I would like to have seen him on this stage of this magnitude way more and way sooner, which brings up an interesting conversation to you. And I pose it to you. I thought about it. I'm like, what are the difference between Floyd and Money Mayweather, right? Because boxing is all about, it's just as much as your skill in the ring and your character outside of the
Mhm.
ring and marketing, and
Yep.
Bud never really, Bud is about his business. You don't hear nothing about him until he's in that ring, which I respect.
Yep.
But there's more money to be made if you are able to do that. And this is a business. You have to make yourself marketable for people to want to give you these huge fights. So I just think that's really the difference to me. And and I don't disrespect Floyd at all. I think he did a good job of building his character, his entertainment aspect of himself. But I think Bud could have done that more to be on a bigger scale a little sooner.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that sometimes it lends towards, what your true personality and persona is. And I think that, like you said, Bud is really true to himself. And so he's not going to necessarily force that. And I'm not saying that Floyd isn't true to himself. I think that Floyd
Yeah,
truly is
yeah,
more so of a showman. And he's,
yeah,
Money Mayweather. And he going to let you know all that type of stuff. And he wants to do all the talking. And he's going to, draw or garner the big time interest. And so, I think that that's, as you've already, I mean, eloquently said, I mean, that's the difference really with the two right there. For Bud, for him, I'm just gonna go about my business. I just want my respect. Like Bud is just, I just want my respect. I'm gonna go about my business. That's all he
yeah.
cares about. And so, For Floyd, he changed the game, honestly, in the way in which he did things.
Yeah.
The amount of money that you see boxers make, like Floyd is attributed to that big time. And I think that, what don't want to miss as it relates to Floyd, like I still believe that Floyd is the best defensive fighter that I've ever seen. I think that his defensive skills are, to me, just the best I've personally seen. I think that, for me, Bud just attacks you a little bit more. Like Bud is gonna mix it up with you a little bit more while still being good defensively as well too. And I just kind of, I feel like Bud is the superior offensive fighter, and I think that Mayweather is probably the superior defensive fighter. And so it's just all in kind of what you want with that. But like you said, if Bud may have taken kind of that Mayweather approach, see Mayweather had the big time pay-per-view fights that people were able to see him on that stage, like you said, sooner in his career than Bud because of all of that piece. And I think that you'll have some people that may not regard Bud what he needs to be because he didn't get those bigger fights soon enough for people to see who he truly is.
Yeah, man. Again, well said, brother. I mean, a three-weight undisputed boxing champion, only the second in this four-belt era. Put some respect on the man's name. Ramon, let's get into some NFL. I know you're excited to jump into it, man. I ain't gonna hold anything. The floor is yours. Your Colts are 2-0. 2
Yes.
and 0. Who would have ever thought? The floor
Like
is yours, brother.
like I said, man, welcome to the Daniel Jones era. Who would have thought we would have ever been saying that? I had to drop that, obviously. But I think that, honestly, I think that what we may be seeing, and I'm not rushing to anything. We still just 2-0 at this point, and I'm not
Is it because y'all
proclaiming.
want to be micromanaging on the sideline?
No, I think that people mixing that up too, man. I think that she just likes the vibes of being in the midst and being in the sideline. I don't think it's the whole
Bro, she
micromanaging
doing
piece.
too much, bro. She
Nah, I think
doing
she
too
just
much,
like being in
bro.
the mix, man. But honestly, when looking at the team, I think that you have a situation where Daniel Jones finds himself in a spot to really be optimized. We know what we've talked about Shane Steichen before and what he can do, which that's even a greater, I guess, referendum on Anthony Richardson if Shane Steichen can't make you viable. But we've
Oh,
seen,
yeah.
what he's done with quarterbacks time in and time out again, and we look at really Daniel Jones and maybe being someone that more so fits in kind of the model of what Baker Mayfield has been able to do. Or we look at even what Sam Darnold was able to do last year and kind of even a start to this year, where it may be guys who just needed a little bit more time and guys who needed to find themselves in a better situation. And so you see him right now operating in the offense. And I think that the offense, he's able to get the ball to the playmakers, which is honestly what you just need to do. Get the ball in the hands of Jonathan Taylor. Be able to get the ball in the hands of Michael Pittman. Get the ball in the hands of Josh Downs, Alec Pierce. And so it's not like to me that he is, setting the world on fire with all these amazing plays that he's making, but he's showing you that, he's able to be competent really within this offense. And that's all that we looked for, all that we really needed is some competent QB play. And so I think that that's ultimately what's exciting. I'm not about to jump the gun here and put us into this contention spot or anything like that. I'm still very realistic about what we represent and who we are really within the league. So I don't put us in that contention spot, but I do think that this is a team that could find themselves within the playoffs. So I've definitely been pleased with the 2-0 start thus far.
Look, man, you should be very excited. You beat a really good Broncos team that has a really good defense that made the playoffs last year. So, I mean, all the respect. I think I agree with you. Not to beat a dead horse. Daniel Jones finally has a staff that believes in him, and you guys have the playmakers to, and the Pittmans, the Warrens, and the Jonathan Taylors to take pressure off of him. So, I don't think it's a fluke. I mean, I think that these are two solid wins that Child was able to accumulate against the Dolphins and the Broncos. So, and if you don't know, Ramon's is a die-hard Colts fan. It ain't no joke with it. He ain't just jump on his bandwagon.
All
So
right.
I'm happy to hear him. As for my New Orleans Saints, I'm embarrassed to have the towel, but I'm pride. I got the pride in the back. You know what I mean? I got the hoodie on. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? We're gonna keep pushing. We all knew this was gonna be a tough season. And hold on, who that nation. I really feel as though this 0-2 start is it's no fluke. I mean, I think we're going to be in a lot of games. This 49ers game, we were in it for the majority of it, and then we fizzled out. I think that's going to be the majority of this season. So just be patient. We're going to get that high draft pick. Ramon, I don't expect us to win more than 3 games this year. So that's just how I feel. I think it's gonna be where we're in games like this, and then eventually the other team take over. What I am encouraged by, oh, it's nice to see is Spencer Rattler's not as bad as I thought he was gonna be, and we do look competent under Kellen Moore, and that's all you can ask. He makes mistakes as a new head coach, but for the most part, we look at least competent. And that's all I can ask for.
Yeah, no, that's what
I,
I was honestly gonna say as it relates to y'all. Like I felt that, Spencer Rattler he hasn't been bad. He's been pretty decent and serviceable. He's able to get it to the weapons pretty decently. Y'all were able to still run the ball pretty well with Alvin Kamara. We know who he is and what that represents. It's just honestly a tough spot, and it may really behoove y'all to have a bad season. I always say, and we say it too off the record with this. I want to be in one or two. I want to be in one spot or the other. Either I want to be a contender and be really good, or I want to be really bad and position myself to get on that other end. Staying in the middle is not where you want to be. So be bad, get the draft picks to set yourself up for the big time boom.
Well, we're gonna be really, really bad, Ramon. Not by choice, I tell you that. But just moving along, talking about some other bad teams. I mean, how about Geno Smith and how bad he looked last night against the Chargers? They were given every opportunity to win that game last night. Now I get it; the offensive line didn't stand up right for him, but I mean, some of the throws and the decisions that he was making, I just couldn't. I really couldn't defend it anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he even alluded to as well being a little over aggressive in certain instances. I think one of them was kind of warranted, the third down play where he kind of heaved it because they were going to have to probably punt
He threw
anyway
a
if they
Hail
didn't.
Mary with
Yeah,
6 minutes left in the
yeah, well,
fourth.
yeah. Well, no, I mean, a lot of that stuff is inexcusable. I was just talking about one sequence I saw in the
Oh,
second
okay,
quarter.
I got you.
But no, beyond that, definitely over aggressive. I think that they have to figure out a way to me to be able to utilize Genty, better as the season goes on. I know that they're kind of trying to
Yeah.
almost slowly work him in, but you can see the moments where he's just kind of
Oh
one
man,
thing from
he has
breaking
the
it. Like,
most bro, he has the most exciting 5 yard runs I ever seen in my life. Like just the jump cuts. I was like, okay, this dude's special.
yes, yes. So I think that they have to figure that out in order to optimize that offense. But, beyond that, like you said, they did not look good at all.
And here the Chargers are 2-0. They shouldn't be 2-0. They did everything in their power to lose that game. Speaking of bad teams, let's go to Bryce Young, man. Looked like that little Space Jam juice he had that he ended the last year. He looked good. He's been looking pretty poor so far this season through 2 games. And the Panthers are sitting 0-2 right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is kind of a position, that you're put in. Of course, obviously they trailed a good part of that game, so game script, you're gonna have to throw a lot. And I think that still ultimately, I think he finished the game with over 300 yards, but sometimes those can kind of be empty stats a bit. You saw I think the biggest bright spot was to see Ted McMillan kind of get rolling a little bit, because he's gonna obviously like need him to be a true wide receiver one within that offense. I think that it's just honestly just going to take time. I think that Carolina doesn't totally have the tools right now, doesn't totally have the weapons, for him to be to that place of being elite or anything like that. But, kind of even for that draft class, I mean, recently, I mean, the quarterback play has not been great. I mean, CJ Stroud has not been great. We already see Anthony Richardson obviously has
Yeah.
been benched. So it's, that draft class so far, those guys have not been great up at the top.
No, it haven't been great at all. And then you got the Lions beating the Bears 52-21. You got to think that they were motivated facing their old offense coordinator Ben Johnson in Chicago. And then the most impressive win I think I would have to go with. I don't know about your opinion here, but I welcome it. The most impressive win and who looked the best to me, I would have to say is probably I'm gonna go here real quickly. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling here. The Ravens against the Browns and demoralizing them. I know that the Browns supposedly not to be a bad team. They are competent. They do have competent play. The Ravens were expected to win, walked in as 2 touchdown favorites, and they handled business. So that's my most impressive win of the week. What about you?
Yeah, I would say the Bills. I think that the Bills just outwardly just kind of thrashed the Jets. We talked about the Jets having some type of momentum, obviously in week one, and the Bills just said, "Nah, y'all not like that." It just
How
came
about
in.
Justin Fields just falling on his face, man, after having a very impressive week one debut
Yeah,
against the Steelers? You think
that's
he
what
was
I'm
just a
saying.
little bit extra motivated against his old team?
Yeah, I'm a little bit motivated against his old team, but I think also too it really just shows us who the Bills are, and I think we have to recognize that they are elite as well. Just as of course we predicted, of course, the Ravens to be able to, go to the Super Bowl or potentially win it all. I mean, the Bills are a team that's up there as well too. Obviously, as evidenced by their Week One matchup. So I think that he was just honestly in a tough spot. The Bills are just truly elite.
Yeah, I agree, man. But let's jump into the next segment, which all our listeners probably are excited for us to get into. But before we do, I do have to get into some key injuries. Ramon, Aaron Jones, it just came out that he's going to be put on IR with an injury. Uh, then you got Joe Burrow, who had turf toe, will have surgery. Will be out for 3 months. Then you got JJ McCarthy, who's dealing with an ankle injury, and he will be out for the foreseeable future. So that means Carson Wentz will step up in his place. What do you make of that, man? He's starting to drop. We got some huge injuries that's being put out right now.
Yeah, no, definitely. It definitely changes the landscape, kind of the league. It felt like even especially at that QB position, it seemed like they were dropping like flies. Because they even talk about, the potential. Seems like he's going to be okay, but there were some concerns about Jaden Daniels as
Jay.
well too. And then obviously too, it almost seemed like Baker Mayfield was going to be hurt last night. So those injuries definitely changed the outlook of those teams. You have a Bengals team that's finally gotten off to a 2-0 start. They finally have not had the slow start, and now they are lost, with their leader. They don't have Joe Burrow, so that obviously impacts things. Some people I saw some conspiracy theories about JJ McCarthy about them potentially just wanting to bench him and doing something that just looks good for the optics. I don't know if I believe that. I don't think they're gonna fake an injury for a guy, but I did see that conspiracy theory float out there. But that's how the NFL season rolls, honestly. That's why you have to have depth. It's obviously very difficult at, one of the positions that we see being impacted, being the QB position. That's very difficult to have, a competent backup or someone who can really take over in that aspect. But some of the other injuries, you got to have depth on your team. It's just going to kind of come with the territory of being in the NFL. So.
Yeah, from a fantasy aspect, you gotta hate the Joe Burrow injury because of you got of course Jamar Chase was going number one in most fantasy drafts, and then how will that impact Chase Brown and his fantasy relevance with Jake Browning being on the center. Jake Browning was consistently throwing it to the other team. They did get the win. He did lead a comeback, but he didn't look Joe Burrow-ish, which we don't expect him to. But I mean, at least hey, don't turn the ball over. We'll see what he looks like after a full week of prep of knowing he's going to be the starter. Maybe he'll turn out a little better. But you got to think that Jamar Chase and especially T. Higgins, if you have him on your fantasy team, T. Higgins, which is probably a wide receiver two on your squad, is probably taking a step back to wide receiver three. And Jamar Chase, you probably would temper his expectation. He had like what 14 catches last game. So and then Chase Brown, I think that'll probably be consistent, but I think his ceiling probably will be capped because of that injury too. With Aaron Jones being out, I would think that Jordan Mason will step in. He was basically, it was basically 1A, 1B in my eyes as far as their usage. So he should be able to step in for it. But JJ McCarthy, I don't know what that's going to do for Jettas. I'm kind of regretting Jettas being on my squad as far as fantasy wise.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. At least you have a guy who was a starting quarterback for many years in Carson Wentz that'll come in and be able to fill in for these weeks and kind of see how it flows. Obviously, with JJ McCarthy being the guy there, you're gonna have kind of some ups and downs as it related to, Jettas. I think that people kind of took what Sam Darnold did last year for granted and just felt that okay, maybe Jettas is just QB proof and we just throw in another quarterback in there and it just is what it is. But it shows you still have to have the right guy back there. So we'll see what it looks like and materializes with Carson Wentz for the next few weeks. At least they do have a serviceable backup, but yeah, it might get a little dicey.
Yeah, the waters are getting a little murky, and I do have Jettas on at least one of my fantasy teams, and I don't feel great about it. But we'll
You
move
can always
on.
move
Waiver
them if you
wire.
want to.
I'm sure you like that, wouldn't you? But here we are, waiver wire pickup for my fantasy football players. Tomorrow is the day to make your teams better, and like we like to do during the fantasy season and during the football season, we always give who we think you should pick up to make your fantasy football teams better. Ramon, of course, I'm always gonna be a nice guy and defer to you to go first. If not, I can go first if you would elect to. It's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll say maybe this guy in particular for you because I think you have some shares of him. But the one I'll start with is I always mess up his first name, but I think it's Bayshell Tootin or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Out of Jacksonville. You know, I think that in that backfield, you kind of were able to see the writing on the wall once they traded Tank Bigsby. You know that obviously they felt good, obviously, about Travis Etienne, but I think that also too that is given the runway for Tootin to be able to have an opportunity to be relevant or viable within his offense. I think you saw him this past week score 15.4 points in typical PPR format. A guy that was able to also get into the passing game as well too. I think that what you have to look at with this one, and I've heard it floated around. I think even Matthew Berry kind of brought this up as an example and equated it to that. You know, could you be potentially looking at a Bucky Irving type of situation? I'm not here to say that he's Bucky Irving level, but he is a very talented back. And, you know, we know that Bucky kind of started out behind in that backfield, but as the season wore on, you know, he had showed himself as a consistent weapon and turned into a guy that we view as probably a top 10 fantasy running back at this point. And so I think that Tootin is a guy to be interested in right now.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And then, with Tank Bigsby being in Philadelphia and getting shipped, that means that that franchise has confidence in Etienne, which I hate to hear because I have Etienne. But yeah, Tutin's gonna be relevant. Ramon, I was trying to find who you was talking about. I might leave the door open for you. I was expecting you to say Daniel Jones if you needed some quarterback help. I mean, Daniel Jones has been looking pretty strong. But also, who I would go with is Troy Franklin. I think that after his performance this past week, it looks like the Broncos were intentional in getting him the ball. If you can remember, Troy Franklin came out with Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. last year, and
Rome
he was the
Dunze, man.
third guy. That's the guy. So from a potential aspect and the way that they're using him, he's Sean Payton's slot man. And if you know historically what Sean Payton's weapons have done in his offense, that's somebody that I'm licking my chops at to get. I think that he has to be put on your team because you could potentially be getting a wide receiver too for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I got a share of him in a dynasty league, one of the dynasty leagues that we share. So,
You want to
um,
trade him?
you know, the price is always you put up the right thing. Hey, anybody could go. Anybody is expendable. There's a price to every player that's out there. So, hey, just let me know. Just let me know. But what I'll say as well too, the guy that I was mentioning, I thought you might have thought about it, and I think that probably maybe you didn't think because he's a guy that people have kind of stashed. But honestly, on some leagues, probably just your family leagues or work leagues, Quinshawn Judkins is a guy that's sitting out there on the waiver wire in certain leagues. Now,
Yeah,
obviously, for some of our more advanced leagues, like the leagues that we play in, people are going, nah, I'm gonna get him and I'm gonna stash him,
yeah,
obviously. But
yeah,
if he is sitting out there on the waiver wire, I think that what you were able to see in his game action from his first week being able to play, he is going to be the guy in that backfield. You know, the other guys will still get some carries, but he is going to be the number one in that particular backfield. And you were able to see, you know, kind of this past week, I think he put up double digits fantasy points. But in just seeing his work, you were able to see, I think he averaged about 6 yards per carry, broke one of them, I think, for about 20 plus to 30 yards or so. So if he's a guy that's sitting out there on the waiver wire in your league, make sure that you go and get him.
yeah, man. I'm feeling a little generous. I might give him one more, and then we're gonna wrap up here, Ramon. Unless you feeling generous like I'm feeling today. But I got. What about your boy Wendell Robinson out
Yeah.
of uh out of New York? I mean, if you watch that game with the Cowboys, I mean, look, Russ was cooking, and they let Russ cook. And I mean, Russ, he had a great fantasy performance too. But Robinson, he was looking his way quite a bit in that game, and I think that you probably can get him on the waiver. We know that he, even with last year. Wandale Robinson was relevant as far as fantasy wise, but he kind of fizzled out. But I mean, now that Russ is looking for him down the field, I mean, he had 142 yards last game and a touchdown, and he was targeted 10 times. I mean, the Giants need a wide receiver too. Obviously, you got Malik Neighbors, and then you got Slayton there. But I mean, I think Wandale Robinson. I mean, I'm a believer. I mean, he's been targeted 8 times a week one, 10 times a week two. That's somebody that I want to get on my team.
Yeah, no, I respect it. I definitely think that he's somebody that could be targeted. So I'm definitely in alignment with you there. I think that we've given him a good bit. You know.
Hey, I agree, man. Luckily, this comes out tomorrow, man. Yo, appreciate all the listeners for hanging out with us this long. As you know, as I keep telling you, we are on YouTube. So just search us up, Opinionated Benchwarmers. Subscribe to the podcast. Join 13,000 plus subscribers and see what makes the podcast so great and get notified when we release this great content. We are also on whatever podcast platform that you choose. So just search Opinionated Benchwarmers and make sure you subscribe there as well. And then we're on social media on X and that was weird. I'm just gonna say Twitter,
Yeah,
Twitter and Instagram O_benchwarmers. And until next time, we out of here.
later.